The stars above the forgotten moon shone like cold silver eyes. The place was silent, a lonely rock at the edge of a forgotten system. Nothing moved there except the wind that scraped across the black sand and the broken metal of old mining machines. This was where Kale Draven lived, far from every world he once knew. Kale was a human exile. Once, long ago, he wore the uniform of Earth's military and fought in battles that burned across the galaxy. But when his commanders ordered him to do something he could not accept, he refused. For that, they stripped away his rank, his name, and his future. He was cast out, left to wander. Now he lived in a ruined shelter built from scraps of crashed ships and rusting machines. His days were long and heavy. He hunted small animals in the canyons, fixed broken tools, and kept watch for dangers that sometimes came with the night. He had no friends, no family, no home except this moon of dust and silence, yet he survived. Kyle often told himself that survival was enough. He had food, water, and air. He could see the sunrise each day. But in the deep hours of the night, when the wind howled like a voice that never rested, he felt the weight of loneliness pressing against his chest. He was not forgotten, however. His story had spread. In distant markets, alien traders whispered of the human exile who could not be broken. They told tales of a man who had survived battles that killed entire armies, a man who lived when no one else should have. Some thought the stories were lies, others believed them. Among those who listened were 3 alien huntresses. They were from warrior clans, races older and stronger in body than any human. Their names were Zara, Luthien, and Shara. Each of them came from a people who believed honor was earned only through the hunt. They sought prey not for food but for glory. The harder the prey, the brighter their names shone among their clans. When they heard of the human exile, they grew curious. A human who survived exile, who lived alone on a dead world, sounded like the perfect challenge. If they hunted him and won, they would be remembered forever. And so, they set out across the stars, their ships cutting through the black void like knives. On the moon below, Kyle had no idea what was coming. He woke each day to the same routine. He collected water from a cracked pipeline left by miners. He patched holes in his shelter with spare metal sheets. He sharpened his spear made from scrap and bone. His life was simple, hard, but steady. Yet Kale's instincts, sharpened by years of war, began to stir. He felt the weight of eyes, though no one was near. He noticed small signs. A trail of sand shifted in the wrong direction. The silence of animals that usually cried at dawn. Something was wrong. He could not explain it, but he felt it deep in his bones. Far above, the 3 huntresses watched him from orbit. Each studied him in her own way. Zara, tall and broad like living iron, wanted to strike hard and fast. She believed no human could resist her strength. Luthien, lean and sharp, preferred traps and tricks. She wanted to see how long the exile could dance before the snare closed. Shara, calm and patient, studied every detail of Kale's movements. She believed true victory came from precision. They argued over who would strike first, but they agreed on one thing. This human would not fall easily. That made him worthy. On the surface, Kyle walked the edge of the canyon and stared across the horizon. The sky was a pale green, filled with dust storms far away. His face was hard, lined with scars and sun. He did not know who watched him, but he whispered to himself, "Something is coming." That night, the huntresses made their first move. Zara dropped into the canyon with silent speed, her armor glowing faintly under the moons. She wanted to test the human's reaction. Kale, however, had already set small alarms around his camp. Strings tied to tin scraps, balanced stones that would fall if touched. When one of those stones clattered in the dark, Kale was awake in an instant. He moved like a shadow, spear in hand, his eyes sharp. He did not see Zara, but he knew something was there. Zara smiled to herself in the shadows. This human did not sleep like prey. He was ready, alert, dangerous. She retreated into the night, leaving Kale to watch the stars with suspicion. By dawn, Kale's heart was heavy. The silence of the moon no longer felt empty. It felt crowded, as if the air itself carried hunters. He stood on the ridge and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there he knew someone was moving closer. The hunt had begun. And though Kale did not know their names, 3 alien huntresses had already marked him as theirs. They thought him prey. The morning sun rose pale over the desolate moon, casting long shadows across crumbled rocks and abandoned machinery. Kyle Draven moved carefully, each step measured. He had spent countless days learning the rhythm of this lonely world, the ways of wind and sand, and the hidden dangers of broken terrain. Yet today, something felt different. The air itself seemed heavier, alive with quiet movement. Kyle's instincts, honed from years of survival and war, were screaming at him. He scanned the horizon with sharp eyes. Nothing visible, but the signs were there. Footprints in dust too heavy to be left by small animals. Faint impressions on rocks where something large had brushed against them. Whoever or whatever was here was clever. High above, Zira, Luthien, and Shara observed. Each had taken a different approach to the hunt. Zara's ship hovered low, scanning for movement. She liked a direct strike, to see strength meet strength. Luthien preferred subtlety, using cloaked drones to set traps along Kale's usual paths. Shara, ever patient, watched silently from orbit, recording patterns, analyzing every choice he made. The 3 huntresses had never faced prey like this before. Kale's mind worked differently from any alien they knew. He did not flee blindly. He did not panic. He adapted. He watched. He learned. Kale paused on a ridge overlooking a dry riverbed. He noticed small disturbances in the sand, faint, precise. Someone had been there recently. His heart did not race. Instead, he smiled faintly. He had faced humans who underestimated him, soldiers who thought fear could control him. These hunters would soon learn the same lesson. The first test came as the sun climbed higher. Zara dropped silently into the canyon below, her movements deliberate. She wanted to gauge Kale's reaction. At the same time, Luthien activated small, almost invisible snares along the paths Kale used. They were subtle, designed not to kill, but to slow, to watch, to learn. Kale stepped into one snare and felt the wire snap lightly against his ankle. He paused, examining it. He had expected traps. He had survived countless ambushes on battlefields far from Earth. With practiced hands, he dismantled the snare and turned it back into a simple warning mechanism. If someone followed too closely, they would know he was prepared. Hours passed. Kale moved through familiar terrain, but never the same way twice. He climbed jagged cliffs, leapt across gaps, hid in shadows that even the alien sensors struggled to penetrate. Each movement was purposeful, yet unpredictable. Zara growled in frustration. Every attempt to corner him failed. Kale was not fast, like most prey, but he was smarter. Each obstacle she thought would trap him became a tool for his escape. Her strikes met only empty air and echoes. Luthien, ever calculating, sent out a small drone that glided silently ahead of Kale's path. It recorded his movements, patterns, and responses. She studied the replay on her ship, intrigued. This human was not reckless. He calculated, adapted, and anticipated. There was no room for error. Shara observed from afar, her calm gaze never leaving him. She did not rush. She did not strike. In Kyle, she saw more than prey. She saw a puzzle, a mind that challenged everything she thought she knew about humans. Shara began to wonder if the hunt itself would teach her something she had never expected. As night approached, Kyle made camp on a ridge overlooking a vast canyon. He had chosen this spot carefully, open enough to see threats, narrow enough to control approaches. He built small alarms from scraps of metal and stone. Every string, every tin, every balanced rock was placed with thought. If anyone came too close, they would trigger a warning, and someone did. A soft clatter echoed from below. Kyle froze, his spear in hand, his muscles tensed, his eyes scanning. Nothing moved, But the signs were clear. He had been watched, followed, studied. Whoever was out there was close, testing him, waiting for the perfect moment. Kyle did not run. He did not hide. He waited, knowing that patience was often stronger than speed. When Zira appeared, stepping from shadow to shadow, Kyle struck first. Not with anger, not with hate, but with the precise motion of a man who had spent years fighting and surviving. Zira leapt back, narrowly avoiding his spear. The force of Kale's throw was calculated, not excessive, enough to warn, enough to challenge. She smiled faintly, impressed. Few creatures dared to meet her strength and move unharmed. Meanwhile, Luthien's snares activated, a trap closing, somewhere along Kale's path. He anticipated it, turning the obstacle into a diversion. A rock fell, making noise, drawing attention away from his escape route. He slipped through shadows like a ghost. Shara's voice came through the comms in their alien tongue, calm and measured. He is not simple prey. Observe, adapt. There is more here than strength or fear. The three huntresses paused, watching him vanish into the canyon's maze. The human exile had done what few could, survive the first hunt without running, without panic and without fear. Kyle crouched on a ledge looking down at the canyon floor. His breathing was few. Kale Draven moved like a shadow through the narrow canyon, his senses alert to every sound and movement. The wind had died down, leaving only the soft hiss of sand shifting under his feet. For days he had felt it, the presence of his hunters, and now he knew they were closer than ever. His mind worked quickly, calculating paths, exits, and traps. Every instinct he had, honed in a lifetime of survival, told him the first confrontation was near. Above, Zara, Luthien, and Shara watched, silently. Their ships had descended to low orbit and their eyes followed Kale's every step through high-resolution sensors. Zara's patience had thinned. She wanted a direct strike to test the human strength face-to-face. Luthien, analytical as ever, had studied his recent moves and knew that brute force alone would not capture him. Shara observed quietly, her mind cataloging Kale's every maneuver, seeking the moment when his cleverness might meet its match. Kale reached a narrow gorge, jagged walls pressing in on both sides. It was a natural funnel, perfect for an ambush or for a trap. He crouched low, setting small alarms of tin and stone. Each was designed to warn him of movement without giving away his exact position. Then he waited. Zara dropped silently from above, landing on a rocky ledge just out of sight. She had followed his tracks carefully, expecting him to fall into a snare or panic at her presence. She had underestimated him. Kale's foresight had anticipated every step, every reaction. From the shadows, Kale watched. He could see the faint glimmer of her armor catching the moonlight. He knew she was there. He did not attack immediately. This was a test as much for him as for her. Suddenly, Zara lunged forward, aiming to close the distance quickly. Kale sidestepped, letting her momentum carry her forward. She struck at empty air, her hand hitting only stone. Kale countered, tossing a sharpened rock that grazed her shoulder, more a warning than a wound. Zara laughed, a deep, echoing sound impressed by his skill. "Not bad for a human," she said, her voice low and dangerous. Kyle did not reply. He kept his eyes on her, ready for the next move. Every second was a calculation, every gesture a choice between survival and mistake. He had learned long ago that fighting with anger or fear was foolish. The mind must stay clear, the body controlled. Luthien emerged from another path, moving like a ghost along the canyon wall. Her eyes were sharp, her hands ready to trigger hidden traps. Kale had anticipated her as well, placing obstacles that forced her to reveal her position before she could strike. A small snare snapped, sending a sound echoing through the canyon. Luthien froze, realizing the human had planned for her, then adjusted her approach with careful precision. Shara remained in the shadows, observing quietly. She saw Kale's calm, measured responses and felt something unexpected: admiration. He was clever, disciplined and unyielding. This was no ordinary prey. He had the mind of a hunter, even if he did not carry their armor or weapons. The three Huntresses realized something crucial. Kale was not running. He did not panic. He met every attempt to trap him with skill and patience. He adapted faster than they could plan, and each encounter taught him something new. Kale moved to higher ground, using the canyon's uneven cliffs as cover. He noticed Zara climbing toward him, her strength unmatched, her steps deliberate. He readied his spear, not as a weapon to kill but as a tool to keep her at distance. When she lunged, he sidestepped and used her momentum to push her slightly off balance. She recovered quickly, but her respect for him had grown. "You are not just surviving," she said, breathing hard. "You are challenging us." Kale's eyes narrowed. He did not respond with words. His actions spoke louder than any sentence. Each time they tried to corner him, he slipped through with ease. Each trap meant for him became a diversion or advantage. The canyon itself seemed to bend to his will. Luthien decided to test him differently. She created a false path, leading him toward an area she had prepared with multiple snares. Kale approached carefully, noticing tiny inconsistencies in the terrain. A rock slightly out of place, a branch that bent unnaturally. He did not fall for it. Instead, he used the traps to slow any pursuer and moved along a safer path, watching and learning. Shara finally stepped closer, speaking softly in the alien tongue. "You think you understand the hunt, human. But the hunt is not only strength, it is patience, strategy, and courage. You have all three." Kyle paused, considering her words. He did not fully understand their language, but the tone was clear. Respect. For the first time, he realized that this hunt was more than survival. It was a test, not only of his body, but of his mind and spirit. Night fell, and the canyon darkened. Kyle made camp in a narrow alcove hidden from the view of the three Huntresses. He built small alarms and arranged stones to make noise if approached. Every choice was deliberate. He knew they would not stop. The Huntresses were relentless. But he also knew he had something they could not anticipate: human ingenuity. Above, the Huntresses regrouped. Zara flexed her hands, frustrated by every failed attempt. Luthien's eyes glimmered with intrigue, fascinated by Kale's cleverness. Shara remained calm, thoughtful, realizing that this human was teaching them more than they could have imagined. Kale lay under the stars, listening to the quiet hum of the moon and the soft sounds of his traps. He had survived the first direct clash. He had faced their strength, cunning, and precision, and he was still standing. He realized that the hunt was no longer just about being chased. It was about understanding, adapting, and proving that he was more than prey. Somewhere above, three alien Huntresses marked him not just as prey, but as a challenge, a puzzle. A human who had earned their attention, their respect, and perhaps their curiosity. Kale Draven, the exile of Earth, had survived. The first real test of the hunt. He was no longer simply a man avoiding capture. He was a mind capable of turning danger into opportunity, fear into strategy, and threat into lesson. And as the wind howled through the canyon, carrying whispers of distant stars, Kale smiled faintly. The real clash of wills was only beginning. Hunt was far from over. The moon's pale green light stretched across the jagged canyons as Kale Draven moved silently through narrow corridors of stone. Days had passed since the hunt began, and every moment brought new challenges. His mind was sharp, his body alert, and his instincts honed to a razor's edge. He had survived direct attacks, clever traps, and relentless pursuit. Now he faced a truth he had not expected. The hunt was not just a chase. It was a test of everything he had ever learned. Above him, Zara, Luthien, and Shara hovered in orbit, each watching with a mix of admiration and frustration. The three Huntresses had come prepared for a simple capture, expecting strength or cunning alone to succeed. Instead, they found a human who could think 3 steps ahead, who adapted faster than they could plan, who turned every trap into an advantage. Sarah's patience wore thin. Her strength alone could not catch him. Every leap, every move, every counterattack proved that brute force was not enough. "This human," she muttered in frustration. "He is more than any prey I have faced." Luthien, always analytical, had begun to understand him. She saw patterns in Cale's movements, small habits that revealed a mind constantly calculating and anticipating. She could predict his next step in most cases, but he always seemed to adjust, as if he were aware of their awareness. "He is clever," she admitted softly. "Cleverer than I imagined." Shara remained quiet, her calm presence observing the unfolding hunt. She did not need to strike. Her mind was learning. She noted how Cale turned disadvantage into opportunity, how he used the environment, his traps, and even their own tactics, to stay ahead. In him she saw not prey but a teacher. Kyle moved along a ridge overlooking a deep ravine. He knew this canyon better than anyone. Here he could control the terrain, set traps, and force the Huntresses to reveal themselves. He paused and listened to the soft echoes of movement. He had anticipated this. The three hunters were working together now, coordinating in ways he had not faced before. It began with Zira. She leapt from a higher ledge, moving with power and speed. Cale sidestepped, letting her momentum carry her, past him and pushed a loose rock that tumbled down the ravine. The noise drew attention, just as he had intended. From the shadows, Luthien activated a series of snares and alarms. Cale avoided the traps, but he guided their attention toward false paths, sending them on a chase through dead-end canyons. Every step he took was calculated, every move a part of a larger plan. Shara, observing quietly, saw it all. She recognized that Cale was not fleeing. He was guiding them, teaching them, controlling the hunt in ways they had not expected. Her mind raced, considering the implications. This human was different. He was not prey. He was shaping the hunt itself. Hours passed as the moon shifted overhead. Kyle led the Huntresses through complex terrain, creating illusions, false trails, and controlled risks. With each maneuver, he tested their strength, their patience, and their strategy. He wanted them to learn, even if they did not realize it yet. Finally, Cale made his move. He led them to a narrow canyon with cliffs rising on both sides. The passage was tight, forcing them to follow him single file. Cale positioned himself at a higher ledge hidden from view and prepared his next move. Zira entered first, her strength and agility allowing her to navigate the difficult terrain. Cale Draven moved quietly along the canyon floor, the soft green light of the twin moons painting the rocks in pale hues. Days had passed since the first confrontation, and the Huntresses had begun to realize something he had known all along. This was no ordinary pursuit. The rules were different, the stakes were higher, and the prey they sought was no ordinary human. Zara, Luthien, and Shara followed, their ships barely visible in the night sky, cloaked from detection but still present. They had learned to respect Kyle's cleverness and his ability to adapt, yet their warrior instincts drove them forward. The hunt was their sacred duty, a tradition as old as their clans. They believed in the glory of pursuit, the honor of tracking a prey that tested their strength, skill, and patience. And for centuries, their ancestors had hunted with no end in sight. But Cale had begun to change the rules. Each maneuver, each trap avoided, each calculated step he took had taught the Huntresses something they had never considered. The hunt could be more than victory or defeat. It could be a lesson. As Cale approached a narrow ridge, he sensed their presence before he saw it. The air felt heavier, charged with anticipation. He paused, crouching behind jagged rocks, and watched the three hunters move with careful precision. Zara led the group, her muscles tense, ready for direct confrontation. Luthien followed, calculating every possible move. Shara brought up the rear, calm and observant, her eyes analyzing Kyle with quiet fascination. Kyle stepped into the open, his spear held loosely in his hand. He did not hide. He did not flee. He faced them directly, knowing this moment was important. "You believe this is a simple hunt," he said, his voice steady and commanding. "You think I am prey, but there is something you do not understand." Zara's eyes narrowed. "Speak quickly, human. Words will not save you." Kale smiled faintly. "I know your clans. I know the reason you hunt. You seek glory, honor, and the endless challenge of pursuing prey that can never be defeated. You think this is what makes you strong." Luthien tilted her head, curiosity sparking in her sharp eyes. "And are we wrong?" "You are trapped," Kale replied. "Trapped in a cycle that has no end, no purpose beyond tradition. You hunt, and yet you learn nothing, you gain nothing that matters. The prey may die or it may survive, but the real lesson is lost." Shara stepped closer, her calm expression unchanging. "And you would know this because," she asked. "Because I have survived what others could not," Kale said. "I have adapted, I have endured, and I have learned. You see me as prey, but I am more than that. I am a challenge, a mirror showing you the truth about your hunt." The three huntresses exchanged glances. They had been trained to see prey as an object, something to conquer, something to test themselves against. But Kale had survived every challenge without arrogance, without aggression, without unnecessary force. His mind had become the tool that turned the hunt into a lesson. Zara took a step forward. "You speak of lessons, human, yet we are hunters. Our honor demands pursuit, danger, and risk. This is our way." Kale shook his head. "It is only your way because you have never questioned it. Glory without understanding is empty. Endless pursuit without growth is meaningless. You are powerful, yes, but that power has no purpose if you continue blindly." Luthien's analytical mind raced. Kyle was right. The patterns of their hunt, the endless cycles of tracking, the repetition of tradition, all had been without true challenge until now. He had shown them something they could not ignore. Shara's voice was soft but firm. "If what you say is true, then the hunt we began for glory may no longer be justified." Kale nodded. "I do not ask you to abandon honor. I ask you to see beyond it. The chase does not have to be endless. You can choose meaning over tradition. You can learn, grow, and become stronger in ways you never imagined." The realization hit them slowly. Their sacred vow, to hunt prey that could never, and to prove eternal worth, had blinded them. They had sought strength through endless pursuit, yet here was a human standing alone, showing them that true strength was measured not by the hunt, but by understanding, adaptation, and courage. Zara's fists unclenched, her tension easing, slightly. She felt respect, mingled with uncertainty. Luthien's mind reeled with possibilities, imagining a new way to test skill and patience. Shara remained calm, considering how the hunt could change, how they could redefine honor without losing their identity. Kale took a step closer. "You wanted the endless hunt. You believed it defined you. But now you see that the hunt itself is meaningless if it has no purpose. Choose a path that matters. Choose growth, understanding, and strength that cannot be measured by pursuit alone." The huntresses were silent. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the weight of their thoughts. They had been trained for centuries, bound by a sacred duty. But Kale's words carried truth, and the truth was undeniable. For the first time, they hesitated. The endless hunt that had defined their lives suddenly seemed hollow. Kale's presence, his calm confidence, his clever maneuvers, had transformed the chase into a lesson that could not be ignored. Kale turned slowly, his gaze steady. "I do not seek to end your lives. I do not seek vengeance. I only seek to show you that the real hunt is not about the prey. It is about understanding yourself, your limits, and your choices. That is what makes a hunter truly strong." The three huntresses watched him walk away, silent and thoughtful. The realization settled over them like the first light of dawn. The human exile had survived not only by strength and skill, but by wisdom. And he had offered them a choice: continue blindly, or grow. The endless hunt had been revealed for what it truly was, a cycle with no purpose, no end, and no meaning. Kyle had shown them a new path, and somewhere deep in the hearts of Zara, Luthien, and Shara, the first seeds of change began to grow. Kyle Draven, human exile of Earth, had survived every challenge, every test, every ambush, and now he had done something even greater. He had opened their eyes to a new way of seeing the hunt. The chase was far from over, but the game had changed. For the first time, the hunters questioned themselves. The endless hunt was no longer endless. Kale Draven walked through the canyon under the pale light of twin moons. The wind carried the scent of dust and stone, the same air that had whispered through these canyons for centuries. He had survived the relentless pursuit of 3 of the galaxy's most skilled huntresses. He had faced traps, attacks, and the sharp minds of warriors who believed humans were weak. Yet he had endured, but this night felt different. There was a change in the air, a sense of calm replacing the tension that had marked every step for days. The huntresses were no longer mere pursuers. Their presence, once a threat, had become an acknowledgement of something greater. Kyle had not only survived the hunt, he had altered it. Zara appeared first. She stepped lightly onto the ridge, her massive frame tense but composed. Her eyes, once filled with determination to strike, now held a new expression: respect. She had come to understand that strength alone was not victory. She had watched Kale turn every ambush into opportunity, every trap into a lesson. "You walk as though nothing can touch you," she said, her voice low but sincere. "But you have survived more than any of us could have imagined." Kale nodded, not with pride but with calm acknowledgement. "I have survived because I adapted, because I used my mind, not just my strength, and because I never accepted fear as my master." Luthien followed next, her movements precise and deliberate. She had analyzed Kale from the beginning, trying to predict his next move, trying to anticipate his survival. Yet with every attempt he had defied expectation. Now she saw that prediction alone was not power. Understanding, strategy, and patience were the keys. "You have changed the hunt," she said softly. "We believed it was endless, a test of who could endure. But you've shown us something we never expected." Shara stepped last, her calm presence a silent acknowledgement of the truth. She had watched and learned, quietly observing Kale's actions and choices. Her mind had catalogued every step, every maneuver, and she realized that this human was more than prey. He was a teacher, a force that reshaped what they understood about the chase. Kyle faced the 3 huntresses. "The hunt you began was meant to prove your worth, to demonstrate skill and courage. But glory in endless pursuit is meaningless if it teaches nothing. Strength without understanding is hollow. You can be more than hunters. You can choose purpose." The 3 huntresses were silent. For the first time in centuries, they questioned their sacred duty. The endless hunt, a tradition so ingrained in their clans, suddenly seemed empty. They had been bound by the idea that the hunt itself was the ultimate test. But Kale had shown them that true strength was measured differently, through insight, courage, and wisdom. Zara's eyes softened. "We have hunted many creatures, many species, and yet none have survived as you have. Not through fear, not through aggression, but through understanding. You have changed what we believed." Luthien nodded. "We have always thought the hunt defined us, but perhaps the prey can define us as well." Shara, the calmest of the 3, spoke last. "We sought the endless hunt, but perhaps the endless chase was never the point. Perhaps the real test is knowing when to grow beyond it." Kale smiled faintly. "Exactly. You do not need to end the hunt, but you can change its purpose, teach, learn, and grow."